that you'll be able to give it, and we will get started now. Oh, it's over already? Yep, over already. Let's go drink beer. Afternoon, everybody. This talk is about the design and implementation of a did you mean spell check server. So it's not like general spell check in the terms of like you have a document and it's checking each word as you in the document. It's basically you've typed in a search and it's trying to figure out what search you actually meant to type in. The first iteration was basically a user types a search into the website. We take each word and run it by aspell. We're using the stock aspell dictionaries. And we took the top result for each word and showed the user that one. Apparently people tell me that it doesn't actually make sense to do spell check in languages like Chinese and Japanese. I can either confirm or deny this. Aspell basically takes the word you typed in, generates a phonetic version specific to the language you specify, so it actually has different phonetization rules for different languages, and computes the Levenshtein distance between what you typed and the words it thinks might match, as well as the Levenshtein distance between the phonetic version of what you typed and the phonetic versions of the words you think it means. That returns an ordered list of the words that it thinks that you meant. There's a short diversion into what a Levenshtein distance is. Basically a numeric measure of how many changes are required to change one word into another. And here's an example of the Levenshtein distance between kitten and sitting. And you can see it's a Levenshtein distance of 3 because there's 3 changes required. So what are the problems? One of the problems is that the dictionaries that come with aspell don't have any proper nouns, which is the big ones are like human names and place names. It also has no idea of what words are common or uncommon. So if you type in something that's very similar to an uncommon, like extremely uncommon word, it'll say you must have meant this word, but probably you didn't because that's a very, very uncommon word. It also doesn't know what words go together. So it may suggest words that on the surface each word makes sense by itself, but the two words are very unlikely to appear next to each other in a search. We can fix this. So the first problem was making a dictionary of proper nouns. Basically, I took a pretty minimal approach to this and went through the US Census data, and they have lists of the top 1,000 female and male names and surnames. We made dictionaries out of that data, and also we got place names out of US Postal Service data. Turns out that place names are different in different languages, so we only dealt with this for English right now. But eventually we'll actually have to go and get place names in all the different languages. So the first problem is about aspell doesn't know what words are common or uncommon, but we do. So I basically pulled 1 year of searches from Shutterstock, which was millions of searches, and made a big storable hash of each word to the frequency of it occurring. The most common word is something like woman, and that occurs in about 5 or 10% of searches. So we normalize that to 1, otherwise all the numbers would be very, very small. So really uncommon words have a frequency very close to 0. So about what words go together, we took the same 1 year of searches from Shutterstock and basically counted the co-occurrences, what words appear together. We stored this as a big storable 2-key hash where the first key is the first word, the second key is the second word, and then the value stored there is how often they occur together. And we also normalized this the same way between 0 and 1. So for example, cute puppy has a very high co-occurrence. It's a fairly common search. And porpoise tile is a very, very low occurrence, probably actually 0. Wait a second. So putting it all together, basically this is many hours to render this also. We take each word they typed, we pass into aspell with our custom dictionaries, we get back a ranked list of the top 10 or 20 words that aspell thinks, and we basically rearrange those based on how frequent each word is and the co-occurrences of those words appearing together. We can only use co-occurrences if there's multiple words in the search. There's a lot of stuff I skipped here. We recompute, when we get things out of aspell, it's already merged together the weights of the phonetic distance and the non-phonetic distance. So we basically recompute that so we can tease them apart and mix in the frequency and co-occurrence data more intelligently. When I spent a bunch of time on this, I discovered that if it's a multi-word search, the co-occurrence data is much more valuable than the raw frequency data, because just because a word is common doesn't mean it appears with a word next to it. And also we could use co-occurrences of the keywords and the descriptions of photos to basically steer people towards not towards what other people have searched on, but to steer them towards what we have pictures of. I chose not to do this because I figured it was more accurate to try and figure out what they were trying to type than to steer them towards what we happen to have pictures of. Also, basically 80% of the searches are 20% of the words. So you have a kind of a long tail if you take a graph of the frequency of each word. So we perform a lot of smoothing to kind of smooth this out. Otherwise, the numbers wind up pushing to the left. Here's an actual example of the data that comes back from the server. This is an English search on Russian battleship misspelled. You can actually see this. Here is the example of the actual search. We say we don't think it's spelled correctly. And here's the suggestions where we think it's spelled correctly. And these numbers have to do with not confidence, but likelihood of this being typed in. And then we also give you, if you want to tease it out, you can also see, well, how likely do we think this is what do you think the correct spellings for battleship are? What do we think the correct spellings for Russian are? And this is interesting. It actually says that it thinks that Russian is spelled correctly, but it's still suggesting corrections. Which is actually because it says that word, R-O-U-S-S-I-N, never appears in battleship, but Russian does. And here's it actually on Big Stock website. We haven't actually integrated this into Shutterstock yet. So there's a search for Russian battleship misspelled, and it says, did you mean Russian battleship? This is a search on Angelina Jolie, which is actually one of the test cases I did, and you can see it actually correctly suggests, did you mean Angelina Jolie? And that's all I got. No, I'm in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, keep plugging in while you're doing this thing. It's a distraction.
I was waiting.
Okay, then go. No, it's fine. No.
All right.
All right.
My turn? All right. So, Moose is great. I don't think I need to go into that too terribly much. MooseX is great. Usually, it has its pros and its cons. Generally, that's also a pretty big thing, so we leave that as an exercise for the reader. However, a couple of them that we can touch on is that Moose extensions don't always play well together for whatever reasons. Oftentimes, you don't know about a helpful Moose extension just because you have never seen it or run into it before, and you have to use them explicitly everywhere you want to use them, which can lead into ambiguities. So I think it's fair to say that most people using Moose on a regular basis probably have a couple Moose extensions that they reach for on a regular basis. Even some things that leverage Moose like namespace autoclean, but isn't explicitly an MX. That generally leads into a workflow along these lines. You start out simple, then as you add more, you add more and more lines in there up at the top, throwing in different Moose extensions, then again, you refactor things, discover, you want to add in other things. You accidentally create bugs by mistyping a builder, things along those lines, and then add additional MX modules to help account for that too and clean that up. And that you just have to do that everywhere. You don't always know what you're going to see or what you're going to have or what you're going to have available. You end up scrolling up to the top constantly. Reindeer is a collection of some of the more popular, subjectively popular Moose extensions. It rolls in several different ones that allow you to, just do this. The moment you see use Reindeer, you know that these different Moose extensions are bundled in. So Reindeer is just a collection of traits and sugar composed together with Moose exporters. It's a standard set of useful Moose hexen. Again, big red caveat there that I think I put a useful selection in there, but just, there's always different choices to make. And it's just a drop-in for Moose and Moose roll along those lines. You always know what you're getting right off the bat with Reindeer. You can vary it again from there, but you have most of your antlers in place already. You can have everything from always course, which is often used, attribute shortcuts. You can always, initialize things with traits because MooseX traits is included. We have type libraries that are also bundled in and exported into your package by default. And we also standardize how you can access optional attribute traits, always providing a constant alias to use in the traits entry. We also pull in some other imports from, I think these are all pretty much standard, try tiny, path class, some type constraints functions to help you create types on the fly. And that's it. Moose is just reindeer, but with larger antlers.
Hi. Hi, my name is Thorsten Rautschus from DuckDuckGo. And I want to tell you that you should use DuckDuckGo as your default search engine, because we actually don't track you, we don't give the IPs to advertisers. We have a zero-click info box which gives you directly informations which are specific to your search term, and it's hackable. You can tune it and you can give us new plugins so that we have more features in our search engine for you. And thanks. And bang. Yeah, shit. Yes. Next time.
Hi everybody, I'm Sartak.
Hi, Shadowcat.
Hi. So I built a small little tool for myself for working with Git a little bit easier. Before I can describe that tool, I need to describe why I made the tool. And there's this thing called Git flow, and I'm happy to explain it. But what I'm actually going to explain is called Git flowish, because we kind of deviate from the standard Git flow at infinity. So here we have a master branch, which we always use to make releases from. So you're always releasing from master, and then we branch off of that to create integration branches. So these are where all the features will land, and then when the integration branch is done, we merge it in, and that's it. So when we want to start a new feature or fix a bug, we create a new branch off of master. We add some commits to it, and then we merge it into release. And then release is QA'd, and it goes through our continuous integration server and all that. And we want to do it again with a new, maybe a bug fix. It goes into release. And then, a couple days pass and we decide, oh, we'll make release, we'll actually release this release. So we merge it to master, and then our build system goes through and produces a package to deploy. But then when we're done, we don't need these branches anymore, so we get rid of them. If we want to change things after the fact, we just continue working with new branches, and then we start over again with the next release. So that's kind of how Git flow works. And the reason this exists is because when you're working with a team, you can't just have a linear history of people committing on top of each other. People want to work in separate branches and kind of isolate their changes from everybody else. If you've seen this before, this is the actual Git flow. What I just described is Git flowish. So the reason I built this tool called Git status tackle is to kind of figure out what's going on here. So we have this branch, it's been merged into release, so it's pretty much done. And then later on we merge these branches into master, so they're done. So I kind of want to get some visibility into that. So for example, we have this remove junk branch that has a commit on it that hasn't made it to release yet. So I will just demonstrate the tool real quick. So right now it gives no results, but if we touch a file, it tells us there's an untracked file in the repository. Actually, let's check out that remove junk. So we have a new branch, and it says it hasn't been pushed yet because there's no upstream. And that's just, pushing your changes to a central server, whatever. Okay, so now we have a commit, and it's on a branch. And now we see that we have an unmerged feature branch that's going into release 1.2.0, and that's kind of the state we have here, where we have this purple branch that hasn't been merged into release yet. So it hasn't been QA'd, and it's not scheduled for release. So this tool kind of lets you get a better picture of what's going on with your Git repository. That's a little bit too big. But here we have other plugins like Working Tree Changes, which is just, it's sort of like this, but less junk in it. So you have all these lines of explanation that you don't need to know every single time you use this command. So this git status tackle thing I made kind of gives you a more concise and I hope more useful view into what your Git repository looks like. And it's all built on plugins. So if you don't like Git flow, I'm sure you could write a plugin to do this branching model, or this branching model, or this branching model. You know, whatever works for your team, whatever your project is using, you can use Git status tackle to kind of build your own. And Shorn, if you're here, you know, you can do your thing too. So if you have a specific project need, you can write your own little plugin, and it works with CPAN. It's all Perl modules. So if you want to check it out, that's how you get it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ingrid. I'm from Booking.com in Amsterdam. As you may know, we are hiring. So if you're interested for working for us, we want to invite you to have some beers tomorrow with us, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. We only have a few spots available, so you can sign up with me today after the talks. I will be in the back, or you can come tomorrow at our stand. We will be in the next building. Thank you.
Hello. No slides. This is all demo here. So this is, I'm really big on tidying. I read an essay once which said that there's really no reason for us to have all these different code standards, and we would all just get along better with our teams if we just decided on, you know, standardizing on code standards and all these kinds of things like Perl tidy and pod tidy and so on. So I'm a big fan of applying these to my code repository, and I get sick of applying all the different ones and remembering how they work, and one of them spits out errors to this, and one of them, you know, processes the file in place, and so on and so on. So I kind of wanted one thing to just unify all these tidiers and validators and run them in one place. So what I wrote was called tidy all. Where am I? Oh, I'm in the demo directory. Okay. All right, now while that's running, I'll show you the config file. So basically, this can take any kind of tidier. In other words, something that modifies code in some way, such as not to modify its semantics. So HTML tidy, pod tidy, Perl tidy, that kind of thing. And then any validator, so anything that looks at your code and determines if it's correct or not and spits out warnings if it's not correct. So Perl critic and XML lint and, you know, pod checking and so on. So in this example, I'm using Perl tidy with, you know, my preferred arguments and my own Perl tidy class. I'm using pod tidy with just the default configuration, and I'm using Perl critic and just using severity 5. And these all have sort of default includes if you don't specify anything. So by default, this will look for all the files that have .pl, .t, .pm, and Perl critic I'm deciding just to process the libs because Perl critic's slower than the others. And so if I get to the bottom, it looks like it examined all these files. And there were a couple of places where it tidied some files. So if it says tidy, that means it actually changed it. If it said examined, it means it didn't have to change it. And then we get to the bottom, and we see a couple of Perl critic errors. Now the nice thing is this will cache, so it'll only process the files if they've changed since the last time we tidied them. So if I run this again, it should only print out the two that are here. And if I go and fix these, so I'm not doing make immutable. These are actually real errors, by the way, that I've just found out while I was preparing this talk. Is that right? No wonder I can never remember to type that. So I fixed that, and that one fixed, and now if I run it again, it should only give me the one error, and so on, and I can fix this one as well, and then I get a clean bill of health. And if I change any of my configuration, or if I change any of the files underneath, like if I go here and I just touch lib, you know, start .pm, and run it, then it's going to examine, you know, cheat up. Well, that was a bad example, but you know, you understand. You understand the point. Yeah. So, so the nice thing about this is I like to do this whenever I commit. So there's a lot of like test modules out there, like test tidy and test critic and all this stuff that runs that do it when you run your tests. Well, that's fine, but it doesn't actually fix your files. So then you see your test fails and you have to go and fix your files. There's other things like Distilla that will, Distilla plugins that will do this for you. I prefer to do this right when I commit my code. And I prefer everyone on my team do this as well. So I think that you should not have commits that look like commit followed by, oh, and I tidied it. Commit, I tidied it. Commit, I tidied it. Oh, I fixed a Perl critic. I just want the commits to be nice and clean. So before I run every commit, I just run this. Since it's nice and cached, it'll only look at the files that I've changed. And then that way all my commits are nice and clean.
I have a question. We looked at doing something, not with everything, but with Perl tidy and commits. And the problem we found is it's not idempotent. So I don't know if you encountered that where it'll change a given file, it will change it every time you try to tidy it.
I've never seen it change every time you try to tidy it. I've never encountered that. What I have encountered is that sometimes it'll change it the first time, and so I actually submitted this change to Perl tidy. There's an iterations where you can have it run twice or run 3 times or whatever, and usually it settles down. I've never seen it flip-flop, but congratulations if you discovered that. I've been using Perl tidy for like 10 years. I've never discovered anything that will do that, so that you should be proud. Okay, thanks.
I'm David. I'm a PDL guy, and I would just like to get all the Perl scientists in the room after the lightning talks. If we could meet over by the piano, so because most of you, yeah, well, sure, but most of you aren't scientists, and we want to meet each other. So, by the piano after lightning talks.
No, it's ready. Well.
Another ad, maybe? Is this an ad for ads? Yes.
Got it.
Ad for ads.
Okay.
Oh, never mind.
Modernizing Perl automatically. It's up on the web. Greetings from the Perl 6 team. My name is Bruce Gray. I go by Udall, and I've been working for about 4 years on Blue Tiger, which is a Perl 5 to Perl 6 translator. It's based in PPI rather than the MAD-based one that Larry and Nathan are working on. And 4 years I started going into Git about a year ago and then went into black hole. So there's a lot of code that I have that's not in Git yet. And what I'm going to talk about, what you care about, is not implemented, but trust me, it'll work. The problem I hit actually in the shower, I realized, oh my God, I've been working on this all these years and I never considered what happens if you throw non-strict code at the translator. Because Perl 6 defaults to strict. And I take long showers, so by the end of the shower I knew what the algorithm should be to essentially figure out, like for F3, it's used in 2 different blocks, but there's an assignment the first time it's used in each block. Therefore, those are separate variables. They can be MIDE. Header, it's catching it midstream there and using it below. That needs to be above the block that's declared in. It doesn't need to be above the if block because it's a conditional. So I've got that algorithm pretty solid. And when I started telling people, on the way down to Peregrine's Perl Oasis, I realized, hey, that sounds useful like in Perl 5. Forget Perl 6. Have any of you gotten thrown non-strict code that you had to make strict as the very first thing that you did to start working on it? Show of hands. Good, that's encouraging. And that was encouraging too. Peregrine said, people love you. And Garu said, I'm going to make a Padre plugin from that. And Raffle said, and blew my mind, well, what if we ship a related tool? Can your thing be expanded so that we don't just have Perl Delta? You can actually run a live program that is Perl Delta to scan all of your code to see if this version of Perl is going to break any of your stuff. Amazing. So the point of all this is these are just people who overheard discussions about this project. And I realized that I don't know enough about the way this could be applied to write it the first time right. Therefore, I'm part of Hallway++. I'm very interruptible. Even if you see me working on my talk for day 3, please interrupt me if you have ideas about this or needs or desires or whatever, because I need that input. And if I run into another black hole of time, you might be the person that I hand this over to. The concept from 4 years ago was translation. And then as I saw how you have to expand the management of your entire code base, the concept became migration. And now with this Perl 5 to Perl 5 translation, the concept is modernization. So that's the progress that I've made conceptually over that 4 years. Therefore, I am claiming the namespace Perl Modernize. Other people are working in the same conceptual domain. Casey West gave a talk at Perl Oasis on how he used extensions to Perl Critic that he wrote to do automatic scans of CGI for known problems. CERT is entering this realm. Across other languages, non-Perl, there is this site, transformation.org, that if you have any interest in this, that's worth checking out, because this is simultaneously occurring occurring to people in a lot of languages, especially our dynamic language cousins. So I encourage you to think along this line, develop related code. We had Perl Critic, we have Perl Tidy. They've been around for a long time, and we're only just now seeing the next generation of such tools. The Perl Renaissance continues. I think this is going to be an important part, this concept will be an important part of the continuing Perl Renaissance. Thank you.
This is an ad for ads. Please. During the next talk.
Oh, I've got a lovely assistant. I'm Andrew Fresh. I'm working with at Grant Street, and I'm here to talk about Testify, which they started internally because we have a lot of apps that are not really testable because they're older code and just not well written, so we had to find a way to test them internally, or test them with something like Selenium, that sort of thing. And we wanted to make it easier to do, so they wanted to have a plain English way to write these tests to allow other people who could to create them. So the test can look something like this. And then you could the idea was you could hand the test to somebody else or to a person, and they could follow the steps and perform the test for you, except they're not very trustworthy, so we want to do it in the cloud. So you send the test to us, we run it in multiple different browsers, they're working on different operating systems, and so then you get the results back, same sort of plain English, same sort of idea. Then you also can get screenshots for every step of the way, or just for failures if you want. We figure this will be useful for CEOs as well as developers, your clients, and business analysts, because everybody should be able to read it. Our advanced commands are not super advanced because the idea is to keep it fairly simple. So we know things about the different objects on a web page, like buttons and links and text and things like that. You can remember different values that are on a web page for later. You can check things based on where they are in a table. You can look them up by their XPath. They're adding all sorts of different ideas, like whether the text on the web page is spelled correctly. You can take that amount that we remembered before, apply transformations to it, and compare it to other values. You can find links by ordinal, that sort of thing, where they are on the page. And then you can create, or what we're looking for, beta testers, so that you can come up with ideas as to what commands you want to add to this. One of the powerful things that we like is the idea of phrases, which are kind of subroutines. So you have a section of code that you do for every test that you want to run. Make somebody log in. So log in to testify. Then your test just becomes much shorter, much more repeatable. You update in one place, that sort of thing. The reason that, or we're putting this in the cloud, one of the things that we hope will be helpful is to have sharing of tests and phrases, so that if, say, you host a web app that other people use, you can provide them with phrases for your web app, and they can then test their version of your web app to make sure that their website that they're hosting on your product is performing as they expect it to. We have a Selenium converter that will take in your Selenium tests and output them, turn them into the plain English that we recognize. Lots of different reports, like how your tests compared to yesterday, today, and things of that nature. And we have a web interface to it, wrappers in several different languages, obviously Perl. And we think that it'll be useful for testing, compliance documentation, because you can write a compliance document and then actually run the document and prove that it works. Automation of things, and much, much more that hopefully everybody else comes up with some great ideas for. You can go right now to testify.com/yapsy and become a free beta tester. First 50 people, bypass the waiting list. Supposedly it works now. Hey, it works now. So if you come by our booth, you can sign up for a chance to win an iPad and T-shirts. I don't know. So, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Uri. I am the Pearl Hunter. I hunt down Pearl people and kill them dead. As you might know, I place Pearl people. I've placed several people who are sitting here. I work for many of the companies here that are advertising. If you work with me, chances are you'll get a job better and easier with help and all kinds of things. So contact me if you want to help get a job or you want to help find people for Pearl jobs. Thanks.
All right, hey, I'm Randall Schwartz. Yay. Hi, guys. So, problem is, you got to test, right? Solution, of course, is test more in friends. Thank you, Michael and the entire team. But what about scripts? Don't work so well with test more. The problem is that scripts are separate processes. So it's hard to mock things. It's hard to modify the way that things are actually running inside the script. Solution is, don't use a separate process. Require your script directly in your .t file. But how do you invoke it then? So the problem is that the loose code in your script is effectively the main of your code. Solution for that is you bundle all your loose code into a run subroutine. You call it main if you want. I like run though. You also ensure there's a true value at the end of the script because you're going to be using require with it now rather than invoking it separately. But who's going to invoke run then? There's your problem. How do you invoke run when you run normally, but not invoke run when you're pulled in via require in your .t? Solution there is use caller. If caller is false, that means we're being run as a script, so it runs passing argv to that subroutine. If caller is true, then it does nothing. But then what about the namespace of the .t file? You don't want your program globals, so the script you're testing, to collide with your .t files thing. So How do we take care of that? Solution, of course, is to bring your script in into its own package. Begin, package, program. All the globals in your script now are program : something. Don't forget that die there. If you forget that die, it fails silently. Very bad. But then how do you invoke the program from the tests? So you want to make it run just like you're executing the script, passing it into argv. Solution is that you simply invoke program : run inside your test. You pass it the argv, and then it does what it normally would have done if those were passed on the command line. But then, what about exceptions? What if the program run calls die? What if it calls exit? How do we capture standard out and things like that? So the problem is you want to trap everything, not just die, so eval doesn't cut it. Eval will take care of die, but it won't take care of exit, and it won't take care of the script, will take care of the script running off the end. It doesn't do a lot of the other stuff either. So the solution is, test trap. I only found out about this about 3 months ago. It's been on the CPAN for a couple years. It's like eval on steroids. You bring in test trap, and that trap block will capture every way that that code could exit. Die, exit, all standard out and all standard error, and so on. We'll get to that in a second. So how will I know how the code finished then from that trap block? Was it a normal exit? Was it the call to exit? Or was it die? The solution is that the use trap also created a trap object that has attributes. You can look at a trap exit to see what the exit code was. If any, if it didn't exit, it'll be undef. You can see what the die message was that it threw. All sorts of ways. Whatever way you can get out of there, the attributes will tell you how it worked. But what about standard out? What about standard error? What about warnings? So how do we get to those things? Solution is test trap also captures those. It has the output variable, standard out variable will be any standard out that was sent during the execution. Standard error will be anything standard error, and all the warns are captured as separate invocations so you can see how many times it warned and which each of the messages were. All for you automatically. So what about stubbing or mocking? What about being able to override some functionality of behavior inside the code? Simple, monkey patch it, okay? You simply, inside your test, you say local program sub equals the sub you want to have. Obviously, this requires some cooperation, some white box testing. You're not doing black box here. Okay, but what about standard in? I showed you how to capture standard out and standard error. What about standard in? Solution, you can do an in-memory standard in handle, and it works very well. So you can just load up stuff into an in-memory handle, and it reads it like it's really standard in. You can even append lines to it and so on, invoke it more than one time. What about changedir? Well, that's a problem. Changedir has global effect. You do a changedir inside your run code now, and it'll modify your .t file. Solution is the test trap is amazingly pluggable. So within about 20 minutes, I wrote a subroutine or a plug called CWD, and it traps any changedir within the script. It even lets you set it to a specific directory when it starts and tells you what the directory was it ended up at, all using attributes. See my blog for this little plugin, or it might be core now. I set this idea to the author of test trap. He really liked it. But does this really work for all scripts? No, because the script might need complex interaction. Maybe you can't edit the code. Maybe you're not allowed to create a sub-run with all the loose code in it. Code might fork. Test trap doesn't deal with forks very well. Solution is, yeah, traditional sub-processes may be combined with expect, but test trap is amazingly useful. Thank you.
Oh, me again. Hey. What I wanted to say an additional is that first we have the banks. So when you go an exclamation mark G after your search term, you are directly redirected to Google, and so can access 150 other search engines also directly, which is very handy for many people who don't want to configure their browser every time for the search terms. Easy way, shortcuts. And the other thing I want to say is that we make a hackathon, a Kraken Tech we call it, where we have 1 day of talks and 1 day of hacking at the DuckDuckGo headquarters. It's free, you can all come if you want. Even though we have a limited size of people there, so we have just place for 30 people or so. But the food is free, and yes, we would like to see many of you. It's at the 30th June to the 1st July on this weekend.
Where?
At Philadelphia, sorry. It's around Philadelphia.
Paoli.
Exactly, Paoli, thanks. And if you need more information, just come to me and talk with me, and I give you more.
No, it's not about clouds, it's about hardware, because some of you may have heard I'm kind of interested in the hardware. I run the hardware hackathon. I'm interested in getting Perl involved in hardware. So if you haven't been by the Hardware Hackathon, I hope you stop by, because I personally think it's really cool stuff, and I hope this community comes up with even more cool stuff that I can't even dream up yet. If you didn't know, just like we have open source software, we now have an open source standard for hardware. Kind of the poster child for that is the Arduino platform, which is really awesome. But there's other stuff coming, and there's other stuff out there. But just to let you know that there's open source stuff happening in hardware, if you did not know that. But anyway, so what I'm really interested in this hardware hackathon, some people get kind of confused, and that happens, and that's why we're having these hackathons, and that's why I'm talking here and other places, is while some people think they want to put Perl on an Arduino or some other kind of embedded device, which, hey, that's cool, let's do some of that. But more than that, you know, Perl has been doing that forever, right? We like to make things easy. Well, I wanted you to think about what a peripheral is. It's not your printer, it's not your keyboard, it's not your mouse. Well, it is, but it's not just those things. It's not just a scanner. I want us to extend our idea of what a peripheral is to your computer, to anything connected to the internet, to your doorbell. Some of you have probably seen some of my talk, and I've got a kind of a follow-up on it that I'm giving now or tomorrow about how, when you ring my doorbell, I get a text message, which it was way easier to do that than to run a actual physical bell to the 3rd floor of my house, to then run the bell out to my backyard, to run the bell to my neighbors, or to the playground near my house, which in all those cases, I'm pretty much home if someone rings my bell. And I get a little text message, which is everywhere. Although it's really handy when I'm here and I get a text message that someone rang my bell. But, you know, whatever. So I want us to think about what the peripherals are, and so I want to end up making, you know, making the easy things easy for, and that, but with hardware. And I want us to, like, once we start to get tooled up for this, you know, lots of stuff will fall out because, oh, well, crap, that's easy. I just call that module and link this together and pipe that together. And we've seen the wonders, you know, what we can do with web services and just using good old Bash. And we've got the right, you know, Perl modules in place to do some really awesome stuff. So, you know, I certainly want to help some of that stuff, gluing these things together. We have lots of scientists that apparently are going to meet over at the piano, right? Because there's like 1,000 of you that are going to meet over there. So I don't know what kind of scientist you're doing, but some of these scientists actually works with hardware, and they get to use really expensive equipment to, in some cases, just talk to serial ports and spit out some Chrome with the reading of the serial port. So serial port plus protocol equal expensive software in many cases, and I highly suspect Perl could do some of that with a little Dancer app and do just as well in many cases. In all cases, no. Or at least not probably easily, but I think there's a real vacuum that we could fill there that people didn't even think about things they could be doing with the stuff in their labs if they could, I don't know, script their things in their lab on a Unix pipeline. That seems really crazily powerful for me in some cases. So, but we need modules. We need like multimeter. I don't know, multimeter abstract, and you know, how do you talk to a fluke meter, and how do you talk to all these things and make it easy? Because I bet most of you, unlike me, never set baud rates and, you know, all that kind of stuff with parity bits and all that fun days, running your mom's phone bill up to $700 in 1 month because you didn't know this stuff, but you still remember 76324, 264, CompuServe, anyone? CompuServe? But anyway, so I had this job for a little while where I was doing some testing of hardware, and I got to do this. Plug it back up. So basically what I was doing is unplugging the power supply and restarting it. So that kind of sucks, so I scripted it. I took a little Arduino with a relay, I put a little button, whoom, hit the button, it waits 5 seconds, powers back up the device, and I go on with life. Crazy simple stuff. I had some people in the hackathon that thought, oh, I can't do hardware. I'm not going to mention names, hopefully they might, and evangelize a little bit for me. But they were like, whoa, I can't do hardware. And it turns out in about 5 minutes, they were turning servos, or maybe 10 minutes, they were turning servos and blinking lights and going, wow, I can do this. And you can. And then you can bolt REST interfaces to stuff. Thank you, Sawyer, for the blog post. But it's really awesome stuff. And I hope you get involved. And so I have a GitHub, which absolutely has no repos in it, but it's an organization. So I've claimed the namespace for an organization for people who want to join me. You can get, you know, ownership bit instantly. I'll give it to you, I don't care, but I want people to help me start here. Let's build some cool stuff. Let's fill CPAN with cool modules to help people talk to hardware. And come to the Hardware Hackathon. I brought lots of stuff for you to play with.
So apparently, I have famous people watching me on the stream here. Hi, Randall. Really enjoyed your lightning talk. Big Brother is watching you. I really like Test Trap too, so much that I wrote a wrapper module, probably in the last 5 minutes, called Test Effects to automate it further. Just thought you might find it interesting. All the best, Damien.
Just a quick clarification about the contest for the iPad. It is an iPad we're giving away. You go to the job fair that's going to be right inside the Pile building. You take a left. It'll be inside that glass room that was right there beside today. You'll fill one of these out, and you'll put it in a bag, and then we'll draw one out later in the day, and we will give out an iPad. We will have your name and
which day?
Tomorrow night. Tomorrow afternoon, like 4 o'clock. You fill out your name and email address. So I think if you're not present for the drawing, we'll probably email it to you and tell you that, oh, you won. And if you don't come and claim it, then sucks to be you. We'll give it to somebody else. And then we also have a fun contest where you can put in your own when-then clause on here, and it will we'll pick the winners and give them T-shirts. So.
Hey there, I'm Casey West, and apparently I'm late. Which kind of sucks because it's a hard act to follow with toys and iPads and all that stuff. But I want to tell you guys about being the TPF webmaster. That's something that I do, and I wanted to explain why. Do I need to back up from this microphone a little bit? All right, here we go. So the Pearl Foundation's website, www.pearlfoundation.org, is built on a piece of software called Social Text Wiki software. There's a company called Social Text. They were very, very awesome in creating an open version of their system. And a friend of mine who worked there many years ago set up a version of that for the Pearl Foundation with two goals. One of them was to have community wikis available that could be hosted by the TPF, and that would be a service that the TPF could provide. And the other reason was that there was an interesting hack to create a website from one of these wikis, basically using it as a CMS and an HTML template editor. And that's what www.pearlfoundation.org is built on top of. Now, this open source version of Social Text is no longer maintained by the company. They moved on to greener pastures, and they're not really doing that anymore, as far as I understand. And the reason that I'm the TPF webmaster is because I used to work there, and I might be able to keep it alive. The system isn't super great right now. There are two things that are happening. One is that the website is being run off of the wiki. It's not super easy to edit that website for standard human beings, not super geeks. Then the other thing that's happening is there are a couple of community wikis that are still run there. Not all. The Perl 6 wiki is still in use, but mostly by spammers who have figured out how to register, create a page, upload static HTML attachments that contain links to other malware and other spam, and then delete those pages so nobody noticed. So occasionally I get emails from Google that say your site is terrible, and we're going to tell everybody who uses Chrome, and then I go and fix it. So this is my plea. I'm begging you, the community, if you guys want, say, a wiki system to run the Perl 6 wiki or any other wiki, the Perl 5 wiki is now hosted on Social Text's platform that is platform as a service. They're hosting it for us for free. Maybe Perl 5 community likes that, the P5P folks. Maybe they don't. But if you, the community, would like a wiki system, I'd encourage you to build one, because I've offered a number of times to install MediaWiki, but that's not Perl and nobody likes that. And then I've offered to install like Drupal, I don't care, for the CMS, to build a website for the Perl Foundation. But again, that's not Perl. So you can come and talk to me, and I'll be happy to explain some of the requirements. They're very simple. One is a CMS that builds websites that's usable by human beings, and the other one is a wiki platform that Perl projects and the Perl community could use if you guys want one. So that's my talk. I'm just asking you guys to contribute anything that we could install that could replace what's now non-supported code that's running the TPF. There's a question in the front.
This is the time to bring up the killer web framework I proposed last year in Perl 6.
Yeah, so there's a killer web framework that Randall proposed last year in Perl 6, and I recommend anyone use that to to build a website. No, seriously, that's all I've got. I can't offer you iPads or toys, but I could buy you some beer and you know, try and lubricate you into saying yes. So, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Gabor, and I would like to get a show of hands. How many of you are using Windows? Okay, don't be shy. Okay, so as I can see, it's about 10,000 people, including the ones watching from the field. So Randall mentioned a very good module called Expect, but it doesn't work on Windows. And the reason it doesn't work on Windows is because natively, is because there's a module called IOTTY that doesn't work on Windows. It does work on Cygwin, but not on Windows. So I would, and actually when I checked it, there are about 7 to 8 modules, depending on that one, that are not working on Windows because of this. So I would like to get some help from you to take out the code from Cygwin that allows IOTTY to work on it, so it will be able to work natively on Strawberry Perl. Thank you.
So lightning advertisement in between times. I just wanted to point out, at conferences I always get asked if Shadowcat actually exists, or whether it's just a vanity domain, which is kind of embarrassing given that there's 3 people from Shadowcat here and we're all speaking. And I just wanted to point out that we've had a policy for a while where any Shadowcat staffer is allowed to bill a certain amount of time for helping people out in the community, so long as they do it with a Shadowcat email signature or something, so that we can at least pretend that it's business related. So given we do basically, you know, hacking, commercial support for the standard CPAN stack and whatever, what I'm saying is I can't really, you know, stand up at YAPSI and ask people to give us money, but I can ask you guys to help my team take our money to help you, so long as it happens in such a way that our name gets mentioned somewhere, so that they can put it on the bill and Mark doesn't get upset about it. Standard drill also being that we're quite happy to help in return for documentation patches and tests and basically destruction testing new code and whatever. So please take our time, take our money for the greater glory of Perl. Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of Lightning Talks Day 1.